Alright guys, this is part 2 of a 2-part series on moose butchering. So you might want to check out the first part of the video where I went through the steps that I take to get my shop set up to cut the meat. In this part I'll actually take the meat off the quarter and I'll go through cleaning it up and slicing it and bagging it and that sort of thing. So hope you enjoy. Back at it here again today. We're going to do it as quick as possible. This is Tip's Eve today, so I got lots of other stuff to do other than cut meat. So we're going to try to get this front quarter done lickety split. All set up again, clean stuff and sharp knives. Let's get at her. I just took off 4 or 5 muscles here and now I'm going to trim them up. I find a lot of times that's easier if you just take off half dozen muscles and then trim them up rather than back and forth to the quarter. So now I'll just work through and trim them up. Take all the fat and sinew off and clean off all the hairs and clean them up. I'm sure all the professional butchers could do this a lot fancier than I'm doing, and we'll probably have a lot of problems with the way I'm doing it, but it works for me. So, alright, we'll get back at it. Main thing to do is watch for these sections when you're cutting off the muscles. And you can see here there's a little bit of a natural break in the muscles, and if you follow that line with the knife you can pretty much just pull the piece of meat with your hand and then just run the knife along and it'll come off pretty naturally. And then you have one muscle all by itself rather than cutting off big chunks of meat that might not all be the same cut, which therefore will be suitable for different kinds of meat. So if you take off in individual pieces, then one piece is good for fry meat, and the other piece is good for stew meat. But if you're taking off a giant chunk at a time, just slicing meat off the animal, then you're going to have non-favorable cuts mixed in with your fry meat, which you can picture fry meat equivalent to like a steak. We want to make fry meat at basically steak meat. I don't make full-size moose steaks. We just don't eat big steaks like that. Another way of doing this is flip it over and put it skin side down and peel it off like you would fish skin. So your knife is angled slightly down towards the piece that you're trimming off, down towards the cutting board. So these pieces now are going to go into these large bags here, and we'll toss them in the freezer for a couple hours and stiffen them right up before we put them through the slicer. And then this big bowl here has got stew meat in it. Now this is not all the meat I got cut so far because I already got some of it put up in the fridge and in the freezer and stuff. But this is the stew meat, so that's meat that's going to be chunked up into like 1-inch cubes, and they're going to be used for moose soup, moose stew, and a couple of other things that we do. So so that's stew meat, and then I got a little tiny bowl here for grind. So that's the least favorable cuts, and that's going to go get cut up for grind. Being so close to Christmas, I'm not sure if I can get a butcher to grind that for me right now, and the grinding discs are gone in my grinder, so or my father-in-law's grinder. So I'm going to keep that to a minimum. I've been trying to clean it up good and put it in stew instead. And anything I do have left over for grind, I might end up having to freeze it, which is not ideal, but I might have to freeze it before I get it ground. And we got a couple more muscles here to clean up. You really work a lot harder when there's little bits of hair on the meat, so if you can try to be as careful as you can in the beginning to clean it up. And I know we've used a shop vac before to clean it up too, but that's not always ideal either once it dries in. So, alright, so we're gonna pop some of this in the freezer. We got some more already stiffening up, and we're gonna pop out the slicer here now and get slicing, get some fry meat, and then get this bagged up so we can get back to the Christmas holidays. Alright. Alright guys, it's time to start slicing up our meat for fry meat. So you'll see here I got my slicer bagged up, so this is fairly difficult to clean or clean good, so I make sure that when I store it I put a garbage bag or something over it to keep the dust off it, so you don't have to clean it when you get it out. It's already clean, ready to go. Alright, so I just use a Cuisinart food slicer, meat slicer. It's an electric slicer. Fairly cheap. I got it on sale. You get what you pay for when it comes to slicers. This is not a great one. It does a trick, and we've sliced a good few moose with it, and we completely wore it one similar slicing a lot of moose with that one. So if you got the money to throw at it, I would definitely recommend a commercial grade slicer. They're fairly costly, but then you would have something that would be a lot better. Also, I'm not sure. I've never used a commercial one that I'm talking about, but it may be a lot easier to clean. This one, it takes a fair bit of time to clean, and that really factors into your decision making too. You got to be really careful cleaning up this machinery because you don't want bacteria left in it. So it's a lot of work to clean when you're done, but I mean, you're only cutting once or twice a year, so it's not a big deal. All right, we'll get it set up and we'll start slicing. Alright, so this is a bag of meat that I just hauled in the freezer. This has been froze just slightly too long, I would say, but that's just how timing is sometimes. But you'll notice what you want your meat like is it's fairly hard, but you can still move it. I mean, it's not frozen solid, it's just very stiff, and that's by far the best for slicing, at least on these cheaper slicers. Alright, so we'll start slicing and I'll show you how it's done. One important note about these slicers is you put your meat on this tray and then you slide back and forth. On this particular model, it's just a shaft with this piece of pipe that slides over. It's very sticky. It's hard to slice. So what I usually do is I just put a little drop of, in this case it's olive oil, but you can use any kind of cooking oil, and just put a little drop on there to lube it up a bit, and you'll get that cleaned off when you clean up the slicer anyway, but it makes it a lot easier to slice. Alright, so that's how it's done, and you'll see you end up with a very thin piece of meat. This piece might be a little bit thin, but you can adjust as you go. But it's basically like a thick piece of sandwich ham, and you toss that in the frying pan for just almost no time, really. And with a bit of salt and pepper and onions if you want it, and it makes absolutely delicious meal. So these are a bit thin, but you simply just adjust the dial here and make it a bit thicker. So alright, we'll get slicing, and when I get it all sliced up, I'll probably give you guys a couple clips of tossing it in the bags too, but I'll just talk about it quickly now. So all I do is I just use these small sandwich bags. We find that one sandwich bag completely full is good for 2 people to eat, me and my wife. And if we have anybody over, it's just a matter of hauling out a couple more bags. So then once we get those filled up, then we'll use these large bags that I've been showing you, and you can fit usually about 4 sandwich bags in these large bags. These large bags are pretty durable and they hold up in the freezer pretty good. I've used the expensive small sandwich bags, and actually I have more freezer burn with the expensive bags than I've had with these cheap ones. So I don't know if it's a coincidence, but I'm going with cheap on that. So the main thing is, I think, double bag. Alright, so hope you enjoyed and seeing this, and I'm just going to whip through this quickly now, and then I'll shove it in the bags and get it in the freezer. So we're done with it. Alright. I'm not going to show you it all, but this is, I probably wouldn't even use this knife, but in order to cut up stew meat, I was saying I just do about, I don't know, 1-inch cubes or so. So I'll just take my meat like this and chunk it up. So something like this. So you see you got these cubes of meat here, about that size. Oops, that piece is no good anymore. But anyway, you got a piece about that size, and then same thing as the fry meat, I'll just fill up one of these bags, and we find about one of those bags full is pretty much good for a pot of soup. So if you like soup bones in your soup, you can save those as well. Sometimes I'll throw in a soup bone with not very much meat on it, and then throw a bag of this meat in with it to give it a bit more meat in my soup. So you can make soups, stews. We do some slow cooker with it. This stuff is great for all kinds of things. Also, if I'm bottling meat, I'll use this here to bottle my meat. A lot of people will use a lot a lot of people use cuts that are not this favorable for bottling meat, but I think that well, there's no harm in using good cuts in bottles either. So I'm not bottling any this time, but that's one thing you can do as well. Another thing, if you want it, you could always use this here to grind up later if you were doing, say, jerky with one of those jerky guns or something like that. I prefer sliced meat, so I'll use this slicer to make jerky as well, and all I'll do is slice it like this, but slice it a fair bit thicker. And I actually slice with the grain for jerky to keep it together a bit more, whereas I'll slice it against the grain for fry meat. But if you slice it up with that slicer and then and use some jerky racks in the oven or smoker and make jerky, you find it really good. So maybe I'll go through jerky some other day, but meanwhile we'll get the rest of this meat sliced up and we'll chunk this up for stew meat, get it all in the bags and get it put away. Alright. I want to mention one other thing really quick. Make sure you always label your meat. I know so many times so many people have not labeled their meat and then wish they did. We got in a cabin one time all excited to have goose breast and found out it was moose liver, so it was a pretty big difference. I actually enjoy both, so it didn't really matter, but so make sure you always label. I double bag my meat, so it makes it easy. I got these free notebooks, and well, I mean, you can use any paper, and I'll just write moose fry 2014. And then sometimes what will happen is, like, I'll share, say one guy will get a cow, one will get a calf, and we'll split it or something like this. So I'll a lot of times write some kind of code on here. So in this case, well, this meat was from my dad, so I might write dad on there or something, and that way I know what meat's what. Alright guys, so it's all cleaned up. The majority of the meat is all stored away. I've got a few more pieces to put in bags and put in the freezer. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If there's something you can teach me, gladly throw it in the comments. If you liked the video, hit like. And also guys, it's only 2 days away from Christmas. Well, this is Tips Eve here today, so Merry Christmas from my family to yours.